When I was 17 or so, two friends and I decided to camp in the field next to the housing estate so we could drink beer and listen to music as loud as we wanted to. This was a huge grassy field on a slight hill where all the surrounding houses were far enough so that we wouldn't disturb the neighbors and we couldn't be seen by anyone unless they were extremely close to our tent. It soon became late, and my two friends began to fall asleep. I was having trouble sleeping around this time though, so I laid there awake for hours on end, just thinking about many random things. Around 3 a.m. or so though, I heard the distinct sound of grass and vegetation as someone was walking around outside our tent. I was stunned and in fear. For one, because this was a private field owned by a farmer who would probably be very angry to find us there, but more so because I hadn't heard anyone approaching. I just suddenly heard the sounds outside the tent. I held my breath out of fear and shock, which is when I heard another set of footsteps as well, this time belonging to a dog by the sounds of it. Filled with dread, I just laid still as possible, breathing slowly and quietly, and listening to this person and their dog walking back and forth outside the tent. I thought we were going to get shot or beaten by this dude. I saw this guy's shadow, which freaked me out even more. It was a huge shadow, looming over us every time they passed by our tent. I couldn't see the dog's shadow though, even though I heard it making increasingly erratic circulations of the tent. This carried on for around 5 minutes, although it felt like much more time had passed by. The shadows eventually disappeared, and the sounds faded away. They didn't exactly leave though. It sounded more like they were still moving around outside, but being lighter about their footsteps. When I was sure the sounds had ceased altogether and there was no threat outside waiting for me, I freaked out and woke my friends up as quiet as possible. I said we needed to go now because someone knew we were here and we would get in big trouble with the owner. I told them everything that happened and they didn't believe me. They thought I must have been asleep as well and just dreamt the whole thing. I assured them that it was real though, and we had to go right now. They tried to get back to sleep, ignoring me because they're lazy as hell and didn't want to pack everything away. I gave up too, even though I knew I'd never get back to sleep now. 10 minutes later, the sounds returned, like the volume outside had turned up gradually. I felt the same dread I'd felt before. I whispered to one of my friends, and they woke up again. They were looking at me quite irritated, but I told them to listen in closer. They had already started hearing the noises and told me to open the tent to see who this was that was terrorizing us. I did so slowly, easing my hand outside the sleeping bag and up the zipper. It probably took me 5 minutes just to reach it. I was so scared to make a sound. I pulled it up in one motion so violently that I damn near ripped the whole thing in half. When the flaps opened though, there was nobody there. We got out within the space of 5 seconds, and already there was nobody to be seen anywhere around. As I mentioned, we were at the top of the hill, and we were over a field as well, so we could easily see if anyone had decided to run. There was just nothing there, even though it was impossible for them to have escaped so quickly. I was absolutely positive there had been footsteps outside our tent that night, but for the rest of the time we ever talked about it, neither of them ever believed me. Three years ago, my girlfriend and I decided to hike up near her parents' place in Oregon. When we went to visit them for a week, we decided to bring some camping gear and stay the night as well. I had only been camping once before, and it was in the Boy Scouts, so it had been a long time since then. My girlfriend basically grew up camping though, and knows her way around the area very well. Myself, her, and her parents' dog Bear, a Newfoundland lab mix, headed up the trail together. We saw a few people out there, but they were mostly just day hikers. People loved Bear, of course, and stopped to pet him, so a little after 6 we made our camp. We set up our tent and pulled out our grub. We had decided to buy these big sub sandwiches and some stuff for s'mores, chips, and a few tall boys of beer as well. I fired up a joint and she pulled out her guitar. After we finished eating and relaxing, we started winding down and getting ready to head to bed. She was in the tent getting dressed for bed, while I was finishing the joint and making sure the fire was out. Suddenly, Bear began to growl, this low, menacing growl I'd never heard him make before. I pet him and looked around, figuring maybe there was an animal or something out there. We got to sleep at around 1 o'clock. I woke up, only to notice my girlfriend shaking me, looking completely terrified. I could hear Bear growling beside us. She held her finger to her lips, talking low. She told me she'd woken up to hearing voices. I listened in and heard what sounded like 2 men talking just outside. Then we heard something absolutely terrifying. One of them said to his friend, "I'll take the girl, you get rid of the guy." I knew we were screwed. We had no weapons of any sort. My girlfriend unzipped the tent, and Bear rocketed out like I'd never seen him move. He was so fast, I can't imagine anyone could have reacted in time. I heard one of the guys suddenly call out, "Oh shit!" I heard Bear snarling and growling, and then I heard them running. My girlfriend took the satellite phone, which her dad had insisted we carry with us. Thank God we'd done so. She called her dad and he called law enforcement, and they sent people out our way. They told us to stay in the tent until they arrived. Bear came back out of breath, with no sign of the men in tow. We waited for the rangers to arrive. When they showed up, they found no sign of the guys, save for some truck tire tracks and some cigarette butts around our camp. They gave us a ride back down to our car later that day, and Bear got a big steak and plenty of love. Hello, my name is Theobald. I'm 20 years old, and I'm going to explain to you how my babysitting job turned into an absolute nightmare. The story took place last summer in a small Breton town when I was 19 years old. It all started in the summer of 2021. As a student, I had to look for a seasonal job to finance my studies. I'd done several jobs, such as a waiter, a cleaner. All those jobs quickly bored me though. Then I found a compromise between not working at all and doing a ton of work, babysitting. I signed up with a babysitting agency and worked there for almost 2 months. I'd look after children for an evening, at weddings, even for a week or 2 if needed. At the end of July 2021, my agency offered me a job not very far from my own home to look after a child for 2 weeks at the end of August. A few days later, agency protocol dictated that I go and meet the child's family beforehand in order to interact with them, ask questions, and generally decide if I was the right fit. I always found it more reassuring to me as well. When I arrived at the family's house, I met the little 2-year-old boy and his dog Scooby. His mother introduced me to the house, the boy Noel, and the dog, adopted to protect and reassure him when they were away. When she told me that, I kind of did a little grin, seeing as this dog didn't even reach up to my calf. Then she told me I was really saving her life because she was going back to work soon. Noel's father was a fisherman, and therefore he was never at home either. 2 weeks later, I arrived at the family's house and started my job. Everything was going well for the first 2 days. Every morning, I'd go for a walk with little Noel in the stroller, and the dog. We'd walk around in the woods. They had this habit ever since Scooby arrived at their home. As a small detail, we went out the back door of the garage all the time, and we always left it open for simplicity. Things started to get a bit strange on Wednesday, though, the third day of duty. That morning, we went for a walk for almost 2 hours, but when I got home, I felt a sudden tension in me. Maybe it was just my imagination because I didn't know the house very well, but something seemed off here. For example, I thought my charger might have been unplugged and placed on the table, but I couldn't remember if I had done that myself or not. The doors to the downstairs bathroom were ajar as well, even though I could have sworn I had closed them. I didn't say anything to the mother when she returned from work because I didn't know if something had actually happened. The next day, when returning from our daily walk though, the gate on the stairs was open, even though I knew it was always closed. The remote control had changed places as well. The strangest thing I remember though was a hint of perfume that wasn't usually there. I started to worry that someone was hiding in the house, but after searching everything, there didn't seem to be anyone there. That same evening, I asked the mother if she had anyone come by during the day to clean, for example, or do something like that, because I had the impression that things were moving around and that someone else had been inside the home. The mother's face changed, and she no longer had a big, reassuring smile. She started to get worried and quite stressed. She simply replied, "No one. Take photos of the house before the next walk, and if it happens again, call me directly." I found this a bit of a strange response, not at all reassuring either. On Friday, nothing strange happened. I did take the photos and compared them, and everything was the same as I had left it beforehand. As the weekend was coming soon, I would not need to look after him on Saturday and Sunday. I came back on Monday rested and stress-free. We went out for our usual walk around 10 a.m., but the heavy rain and sudden storm pushed us to return a little earlier than we usually did. Thankfully, the little walk still allowed Noel to fall asleep in his stroller. Arriving in front of the garage, though, Scooby started to pull on his leash and didn't seem to want to come in, which was starting to stress me out. I told myself he must have smelled something was wrong. I carried him in my arms and entered the garage. I left Scooby next to Noah, who was in his stroller, and went into the house to grab a towel for the dog. As soon as I arrived inside, though, I felt the tension once more. Only this was far more than last time, because now there was clearly a bag that had not been there before placed right out in the open on the dining room table. I was very scared at this point. That meant I wasn't crazy last week. I approached the stairs. I could see the gate was wide open. I heard a noise upstairs coming from the parents' bedroom. I felt a lot of fear, but above all, I felt the need to have some courage because I needed to protect Noel. I went up to the room to see what was happening. Behind the door, I could hear footsteps, someone moving things around, someone in a real hurry. I don't know how or why, but I pushed the door open to see what was going on. I was hoping it would be the mother, but instead it was a fairly tall man. He turned around instantly. I froze in place, and we looked into each other's eyes without saying anything. I felt like this moment lasted forever. I was afraid he would jump on me and try to hurt me. I just had a bad feeling about this guy. The man broke the awkward, intense silence. "Oh, hey, hello. You must be the new babysitter, right? I'm Noel's father." I cannot tell you how relieved I was. I introduced myself and asked him what he was doing there, because he wasn't supposed to come home this week at all. I came home because of this weather. It was a suitable enough answer as a fisherman. I was reassured and starting to relax. I remember Noel's father instantly bringing things back to his son and not really listening to anything I was saying. "So, where is he? Is he dressed? Can I see him?" I told myself for a father that was normal, though. In the next moment, though, something happened that made me really start to panic. First, I remembered Noel was in the garage sleeping in a stroller still. I felt stupid for just leaving him there, but the second was far worse. I asked him for a towel for the dog, only I accidentally said Snowy instead of Scooby, which was the name of my own dog. He answered immediately, and it made my blood run cold. Snowy's towels are in the bathroom. The problem with his answer, though, was that was not his dog's name, and he looked as if he didn't know the real one either. I kept an embarrassed smile and snuck into the bathroom. I sent a message directly to the mother to tell her there was a strange man in the house. He was claiming to be Noel's father, but I couldn't be sure. I ran downstairs with a towel and tried to make it look like everything was okay. I could hear the man getting more and more agitated upstairs. He called out to me from behind. "Since I'm here now, you can leave on your way. I'll give you the free afternoon." I tried to quickly make up something on the spot so as to not leave Noel and the dog alone with him. I have to work all my hours for the insurance. Just some bullshit. Normally, I wouldn't have said no to a free afternoon at all, but something was clearly wrong with this man. While thinking about what I could do, I walked into the kitchen and noticed a family photo hanging on the fridge. It was Noel, his mother, and a man who looked nothing at all like the one currently in the room. I was very lost. All the evidence was pointing to this man clearly not being who he said he was. I rushed into the garage, picked up Noel in one arm and Scooby in the other, and put them into my car. I started the engine and took off to get us to safety. A few minutes later, the mother asked me to come back because the police were there waiting for us. She was in tears and found her son safe and sound. The police questioned me, but no one seemed to be able to give me any answers. My care stopped for the whole week because the mother took some time off to be with her son. It was a week later that the mother called me to explain what had happened. The man that was arrested at their home was indeed Noel's father, the one who his mother had married before divorcing and meeting the fisherman. He had lost custody because he was violent and often under the influence of drugs. He admitted having secretly entered the old house several times, where Noel and his mother still lived, searching for a way to take him away. That explains why things were moving around and that scent lingering in the air. In addition, he had entered through the back door because he knew it was never closed when he lived there. The reason he didn't know the dog's name is because he was adopted right after his parents had separated. The creepiest detail, though, is that they found a bag placed at the foot of Noel's bed with his belongings inside. The police believed that if I had left without the child, the father would have definitely kidnapped him. That's it. That's the end of the scary story for me. After that, I only looked after children once more during a wedding, but I decided that maybe it wasn't for me. When I was in elementary school in the 80s, I remember some teachers pulling me aside one day, saying they needed to talk to me about something. They told me a man had come to pick me up in the middle of the day from school. The man wasn't one of my parents, though, and so the school told him he could not take me. I asked my parents about it later. The school didn't notify them for some reason. They had no idea what I was talking about, and they had never sent a man to pick me up. I still think about that to this day. What I think about even more, though, is that during the same time at the same school, there were multiple attempted kidnappings at the end of the day, while us 500 kids were boarding buses. Apparently, a guy had gone around trying to grab various girls. Luckily, they were all able to get away. I even remember seeing a minivan speed off as I sat on the bus that day. I don't think they actually ever caught the guy, though. Hi there, my name is Lorraine, and I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me 2 years ago now. At the time, I was 18 years old. It was a Wednesday in December. I was coming back from some morning classes. That day I didn't have my afternoon class because the teacher was absent. My father asked me to walk their dog because I had some free time. I drove over and arrived there, parking right next to the house. I unchained my dog. It didn't seem that anyone else was home. We started going on our walk, staying on the shoulder of the road and not trying to go too far out. All of a sudden, I saw a man come walking towards us. I would say he was around 50 to 55 years old, maybe. Usually, I wouldn't panic when just seeing some random person walking, even if I was alone at the park or at night or something. But for some reason, this guy instantly scared me. I called my dog to come closer. I tied his leash around my hand and set off a little faster. I also stuck closer to the houses in my neighborhood. I could tell the man was following me though, so I quickened my pace even more. I heard someone whistle and my head snapped to the sound. The man was waving his hand at me, telling me to come over and talk to him. When he saw I wasn't going to listen though, he instantly started running and pulled something out of his pocket. At first, I had difficulty distinguishing what this was, but then I saw that it appeared to be some sort of rope. I started running too. I took out my phone and sent a message to my best friend, who happened to live in a house just down the street. I told him, "I need you to open the door. I'm walking my dog and there's some guy running behind me with a rope in his hand. Hurry up, please." She replied a few seconds later and opened her gate and door for me. As I rushed into her home with her, we looked out her bedroom window and now saw the man trying to climb over the gate. Needless to say, we were really panicking at his persistence. We called the police. They told us to make sure all the doors were locked and to not open them for any reasons, and that they would arrive in 5 to 10 minutes. We went downstairs to make sure the door was double locked, then ran back up to the bedroom and locked ourselves inside with my dog. 5 minutes later, we looked out the window and could see the police grabbing and arresting the man. They rang the doorbell and we opened it to greet them. They spoke with us about the incident, and I went home soon after. I didn't say anything about the event to my father. The following week, the police summoned me once again and told me the man was receiving 35 years in prison for rape and murder. They needed me to testify about what happened that day. In fact, if my best friend hadn't been there, I'd probably be his second victim. Thanks to her, I'm still alive, and because of that day, we became inseparable friends. This story took place 4 years ago when I was living in my first apartment all alone. At that time, I was just 18 years old and had just started my studies at the University of Province. My apartment was very nearby. For the record, if I lit a cigarette at the bottom of my building, I wouldn't even have time to finish it before arriving at the front step of the university. My building was in the 2000s a hotel, and so each apartment was in reality an old room of this hotel. The restaurant or reception room and etc. had been turned into larger apartments, which were on the ground floor. The rooms were little ones like mine, which happened to be located on the top floor. My apartment was not really that great, as you can imagine. Very small, very poorly arranged, a fairly large entrance as well. It's understandable in a hotel room, but completely useless in an actual apartment. There was no light in my kitchen, and to top off everything, the toilet was separate from the shower. The shower was in the kitchen for some reason. Who knows why? I was broke though and didn't know anyone in this town, so this was good enough for me. I did have a few neighbors, but I didn't really see them often. The building was already quite large, but because not all the apartments were rented, people were spaced out very sporadically. In addition, there was a period when I went out quite a lot, had a lot of parties and such. The layout of my apartment didn't really allow me to invite people over, so after 7 p.m. I was generally no longer there. There wasn't a lot of time to interact with others in the building. One day though, when I was coming home from college, I saw a man entering the building. I immediately noticed that he was completely drunk and potentially a little stoned as well. I had never seen the man before. I took the stairs and noticed that he was following me up. I was a bit nervous at first, but when we arrived on the same floor, I noticed that he went to a different door. Actually, his apartment just happened to be one very close to mine. I lived in the 36th room, and he was in the 38th. He was struggling to open the door with his keys for a while before I went inside. After that, I would see him around from time to time, either drunk, high, or on the way down, sometimes with his dog on a leash, who looked old and very sick. A few weeks after that first sighting, I was working on a very important file for university when I heard a sudden knock at my door. It may seem like nothing to just hear a random knock, but for some reason it immediately sent shivers down my spine. There was no intercom in this building, and to get in you had to call someone and have them come down and open the locked door, so no one except a neighbor would be knocking directly on your apartment door. Since I didn't know any of the neighbors, it was a surprising situation at best. I looked through the peephole and saw my obviously drunk neighbor standing in front of my door. I opened it and asked him in a friendly manner what was wrong. He introduced himself and told me his name was Ahmed. In addition to being drunk, I noticed he seemed to be quite nervous. He started talking and rambling, telling me that the neighbors were harassing him and being cruel to him. They were all plotting to get him kicked out of the building and complaining about him all the time. He told me that I seemed nice though, and that I seemed to know what it was like to come home drunk. Yes, I did come home drunk from parties sometimes, but unless he was constantly spying on me, I have no idea how he could be aware, because I'd come home at random times, and often very late. I'd also never even seen him on the way home from those parties. I calmly told him that was none of my business. He should talk to the trustee about it so they could help him, and I closed my door. The next night, the electricity was out in my apartment, and having nothing to do, I decided to go to bed early. Around midnight, I heard a loud noise coming from outside, which woke me up. I got up and searched around for my glasses. Then I heard a big bang against my front door. I ran over, grabbing a small statuette of Aphrodite to defend myself. Yes, I know that does sound ridiculous. I looked through the peephole to see what was going on, and my blood ran cold. I saw Ahmed outside, just staring at my door, very visibly nervous, with an eerie smile on his lips. It was dark in my apartment, and it was the first time I really felt afraid. My legs almost gave out on me. I pressed myself up against the door, trying to stay quiet. I stuck another look through the peephole, and Ahmed appeared to be gone. I sat at my desk, lit by candlelight, and waited there, unable to go back to sleep. The next day, when I left my apartment to meet my friends and reassure myself a little with them, it was then that I noticed something written on my door frame. I stiffened when reading the words that had been written. "Hey, I'm gonna fuck you whether you want me to or not, you bastard. I'm gonna fucking kill you." I immediately told my parents, who told me that they were going to start looking for a new apartment for me. I went to the police station to file a complaint as well, but I was told it was impossible because there was no direct evidence that it was Ahmed who had done this. I went to live with a friend for a while. 3 days later, when I came back to get my things, I met a man who immediately called out to me. It was Ahmed's landlord. He told me he'd been evicted because he hadn't been paying rent for a while. He'd also been the subject of several complaints and had apparently attempted to rape another tenant. although they didn't have enough evidence to prove it and the charges had been dropped. I was relatively reassured because he was gone, but I still left my apartment in the end, out of fear that Ahmed would one day return to the building. Today, I'm no longer afraid, but I hope I never have to encounter him again. This story will be anonymous, as well as the names and locations being changed around, since I know the person this involves was still monitoring me all the way up until a few weeks ago. I've moved and changed jobs, but I continue to be very afraid of them. Until very recently, I worked in the team of an extremely influential gaming streamer, whose name I will not mention for obvious reasons. For the sake of understanding the story though, let's just call her Josie. I was in charge of relations. I arranged meetings with the press, communicated with brands, and managed the moderators as well. Josie's followers used to see me on the Discord quite a lot, and overall everyone got along very well. At the time, I was living in Bordeaux, and I know it's not very professional, but I happened to meet a few subscribers outside of work to go for a drink every now and then or that kind of thing. Even today, after I quit my job, some of them are still friends with me. There's even a girl I met on the streams who will soon be one of my maids of honor at my wedding. Josie didn't care as long as it didn't impact my work, and there wasn't any favoritism or conflicts of interest. The evening this happened, there was a waiter's daughter who wanted to celebrate the end of her exams, who invited a bunch of us to go to a club in the city with her. Many people from the Discord in the area went. There was a boy with her I didn't know, who had come with his girlfriend. He must have been a little older than me, and he looked like a metalhead or something. Apparently, he was also a follower of Josie's, but I hadn't ever spoken to him before. His name was Fabian. The evening went well, and we all went home safe and sound. We had a lot of fun, and I didn't really give it too much more thought than that. A few days later, though, the girl who'd initially invited us sent me a DM on Twitter, joking about the fact that Fabian refused to stop talking about me. It happens sometimes. Subscribers like anything to do with their favorite entertainers, and there were some who were very fanboyish about me, because I was in contact with them every day, and they perceived me as the person closest possible to their idol. It's a little unnerving sometimes how enthusiastic they get, but after a while you don't notice it that much anymore. Fabian also had his girlfriend with him, so I didn't think I needed to worry all that much. That evening, as I got out of the shower though, I saw I had several notifications waiting, all from Fabian. As I read them, I could see he was obviously not well in the head. It was a bunch of rambling, huge declarations of his love for me. He even told me that he'd separated with his girlfriend over me. I tried to get him to calm down. He kept sending these messages all the way until 6 a.m. Finally, he begged that I accept a drink with him in the same bar where that person had initially invited us to. I told him that was not going to be possible. His next message made my blood run cold. "Sure it will. I'll pick you up at your address." I learned long later that he'd managed to somehow find my address thanks to a photo Josie had posted on Twitter where we were standing on my balcony. You could see the sign of a store or something, and he had searched all along the internet, calculating the exact angle from which the photo was taken with Google Street View. I spent the evening waiting behind my door in fear, before finally receiving a message that he'd gotten back together with his girlfriend, just a short while after their separation. Later, his girlfriend would message me and ask me for an explanation. I gave her complete frankness, which they outright denied, of course, calling me crazy and psychotic. Given his personality, though, everyone I told usually believed me. Apparently, he was known for doing stuff like this. I knew he kept on trying to learn stuff about me from the other members and kept on trying to find more details about my life to use against me. Eventually, though, he just seemed to lose interest. I met my fiancée soon after. He liked Josie's work and joined her Discord as well. He was very active, and that's what led to us interacting more. He even started to make these public dedications to me on the server about how much he loved me. That did not seem to please Fabian at all. Fabian then started attacking him, searching all his personal details and information to use against him. One evening, the Discord was even raided by bots who all posted the same thing, a pornographic deepfake of me made with the photo from Josie's Twitter, as well as other pictures of me he'd somehow found. She had long since deleted that photo, mind you, but somehow he still found the information. Obviously, he was banned soon after. He found a way to make no less than 135 fake accounts using a VPN, all of whom's nicknames were all threats towards me. One of them was even my real first name, followed with "I'm going to rape you." Even above all that, though, there was an event going on that I was going to be attending. He showed up there, seemingly looking for me. I could tell he also had a knife on him, too. The security tried to apprehend him, but somehow he managed to escape. Luckily, I haven't heard much from him since then, but I'm still nervous that he's not quite done with me yet. Warning: allusions to suicide, death threats, and foul language. Do not listen if those upset you. Well, I recently decided I would like to share this story. This happened back in 2019 through 2021 and still sticks with me to this day. I'll be using fake names for myself and the man I'm talking about, Mary for me and Dennis for him. When I was 13, I met a man on Discord. He was funny, smart, and exactly my type. He was also 16. I don't know my logic with that being okay at 13, but I was stupid and naive. We became very close friends, and after about 3 months of knowing him, I told him I had feelings for him. We then started dating. We lived across country from each other, so we were basically just friends online, but whatever. So as we were dating, he basically started grooming me. As a kid who was always on the internet and exposed to Kik though, I was used to this sort of behavior, and I didn't know anything was wrong with it. He would send me nude photos, gross messages, and pretty much tell me to worship him. I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone online without him there. He liked to control my actions. He told me that he would end his own life if I ever left, and he would always joke about how he was on drugs because he was so sad. He was also incredibly racist. I'm mad at myself for not realizing it back then. He ended up cheating on me with his ex and tossed me right out in the trash, wouldn't talk to me anymore, and said we shouldn't talk ever again because we weren't together. Here's where it gets real bad though. Note, this happened several years ago, so I have a somewhat spotty memory of this time. New accounts started to pop up in the server we used to meet on, a server of a mutual friend. They all started saying horrible things about me. Mary is a fat whale. Mary is insert slur. More things of that sort. The accounts all had names like Jerry Touches Kids or Big Fat Whale. I had gotten in trouble with the server owners because somehow it was my fault people were saying these things about me, as if I had told them to spam bad stuff about me or something. The accounts all started personally messaging me as well, telling me to kill myself, how I was a whale, a whore, and even more. I ended up blocking every account and moved on with my life. Great, at least it was over with now. Or so I thought it was. fast forward to a year later, summer of 2019, and everything started up again. The messages, telling people lies and rumors about me, direct threats to me. I was sent unsolicited porn, death threats, slurs, and told I should kill myself and film it because no one cared. At that time, I had undiagnosed depression, and I almost did end myself. I went to therapy and tried to get over it though. In 2020, right when the quarantine happened, I got myself a boyfriend. He was super nice and reassuring, and eventually I started to come back out of my shell. He and I would play games on Discord together, and I joined more servers. Around 2 months later, I got another message. Someone named Lily had messaged me. It was a normal profile, and we were in a server together, so I didn't really think anything of it. She messaged me asking how I was. I had never talked to her before, so I was very confused. She said we had just had a long conversation about mental health the day before, and she wanted to make sure I was alright. I asked who this was and what she was even talking about. "Oh, you don't remember? You told me this. You said you take medicine for schizophrenia and must have missed a dose. Are you off your meds or something?" I was extremely confused and scared. I had never talked to this person, and I certainly didn't have schizophrenia. After about 10 minutes of this charade, I quickly realized it was Dennis. I blocked the account and didn't accept any new friend requests after. The next day, to my horror, I received thousands of messages with the same comments previously mentioned. Threats, porn, etc. I was terrified. I asked my boyfriend to help me. He told me to make a new account if I was really insistent on using this service, but to not friend any mutual friends we had in common, so he wouldn't be able to find me. I did, which cost me an affiliated Twitch account I had spent years building. I changed all my accounts, deleted most information, and made new ones with barely anything on them. Somehow, the messages found me again. I have no idea how. These new accounts were not tied to me at all. I got fed up and asked a mutual friend I thought I could trust some personal information about Dennis to go to the police and get a possible restraining order or something. I didn't totally know how police handled these online sorts of issues. Months went by and things seemed to be calming down. That is, until the fall of 2021. Dennis messaged me out of nowhere, calling me a stupid bitch, and told me he would always find me. I was so fat and dumb and no one would ever love me. I isolated myself and deleted more accounts. I was never able to go to the police because I had no real information. He had a fake name and a fake address given to me. It's been 2 years and every day I worry he lives near me or something. That maybe he knows where I live or where I go to school. I recently found out he has a website and YouTube videos as well. He makes YouTube videos referencing me in 2022. His copyright claim is something like Mary the Fat Whale Incorporated. I can't find it anymore. It was hell, and I'm still worried every day he'll somehow find me. I hope we don't meet again, and I wish him the absolute worst.